Kia ora e te whānau. Welcome to Industry Insights. I'm Pamela Bell, ko Pamela Bell tōku ingoa, and I'm coming to you from the New Zealand Institute of Building, and I'm privileged today to have two experts on leadership with us. We have got Andrea Lawton and Johnston, and I will ask them to introduce themselves. Andrea.
Thanks, Pamela, and kia ora to everyone on this webinar today. It's really great to join you on this very important topic. I think whether you're an aspiring leader, whether you're already an experienced leader, I hope that you'll get something out of today. As Pamela said, I'm Andrea Lawton. I'm the General Manager of HR for Carter's Building Supplies. Many of you on the call might be familiar with Carter's. Perhaps you're even where it might be a trade partner to your business. We're part of the Carter Holt Harvey Group, and we've been supporting the New Zealand construction industry for more than 150 years. Personally, I've been with Carter's for 5 years now. I've worked in the people space for my entire career. So that includes working as an employment lawyer originally for a commercial law firm, as well as in-house for Telecom, or Spark as it is now. And actually back in those days, I have to say, I felt a little bit like the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. I felt like I was often dealing with problems as they arose. And so I transitioned my career into HR management because I realised that actually I could have more impact and help organisations to be a whole lot more successful by focusing on the things that leaders do in terms of, hiring the right people, retaining the right people, helping them with their learning and development, the career paths that they needed, and setting up managers to be successful. So I've held senior HR roles in public and private sector organisations. I had a decade with Fonterra, so one of New Zealand's largest employers. And then personally, from a leadership perspective, I've led teams from 5 to 125 people. So lots of experience either directly myself leading a team or managing and advising others as well.
Wow, 125 people. Okay, I'm sure there's some stories there. Thanks, Andrea. That's really impressive. Yuli, please tell us about yourself.
Good morning and good afternoon, whichever way. It is 12 o'clock. So hello, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today in this webinar on leadership. As Andrea already mentioned, it is a topic that is extremely broad. It's very important. And my role is as a culture and development professional with the Building Intelligence Group. The Building Intelligence Group has been in the project management space for more than 35 years now. And I've been with TBEG for the last almost 3 years. In my role, I focus on organizational culture. And organizational culture is directly linked with leadership. In this particular case, I'm working with people that are very technically minded, and in a project management space, we have people as an asset base. So we don't have any tools, we don't have any stock. People are our assets. So for leading those people and making sure they have the tools they need to succeed in their roles and in their careers is basically my job. So in that space, I've come from the legal industry as well. I was born and raised in Europe and went through school there and ended up in a legal executive field. Ran my own business for a number of years in the recruitment space and temporary agency space. And after moving to New Zealand in 2015, I have been working in the construction industry and as a business manager of residential civil construction, and now in the professional services space. So that is me, and I look forward to giving you hopefully a few insights into what this mythical creature of leadership is about.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. We're really thrilled to have you here, and it's incredibly timely to be having a conversation about leadership. The construction industry in New Zealand right now is under more pressure than we have seen for some time. We have got some concerns around pipelines. We're obviously seeing businesses changing shape. And here at the Institute of Building, we're really interested in how we can help support our people weather this term. Obviously, it won't last forever. And obviously, there are opportunities inside those challenges. So let's dive first into understanding a little bit about the difference between management and leadership. And the reason I bring this up is because within the Institute, we have about 1,600 individual members. Many of them have management in their job title. So there are other people who are aspiring into management, and one way or another, I assume there's some kind of leadership going on. So Andrea, Yuli, can you tell us a little bit about the difference between management and leadership, please?
Yes, thank you, Pam. Actually, it is a very confusing terminology there, and a lot of times it is used interchangeably. However, there are clear differences between management and leadership. For one thing, management, when you look at management and the term managing something, it is generally a process of systems and structures. It's operational. The approach is often task-focused. It involves planning, organizing, staffing, controlling operations, and often is title or role dependent, including on the authority that is given with that role or title. The objective of managing anything is managing workflow and people performance to ensure organizations run smoothly and efficiently by adhering to established procedures and policies. Now, there is absolute need for that in any organization. However, the difference between that and leadership is the managing space looks for compliance, that is complying with policies, with procedures, often getting things done. The leadership space is much more of a commitment-focused issue. So leadership focuses on the people and the culture, the vision. It basically operationalizes the vision of an organization. The essential elements in leadership that are not in management are three things: leader, and you have a follower, and you have a situation. Those are not necessarily present in management. So the other thing that is very different in leadership is the approach. The approach in leadership is people-focused. It inspires, it motivates, it guides individuals towards goals. It is not dependent on a particular title or role. The objective of leadership is essentially in the positive culture, either generating a positive culture if it is a new organization, improving positive culture if it is an existing organization, or just making people aware of the culture. It drives innovation and it aligns the organizational and individual goals. So again, the key determinant factors here is compliance, as in managing, versus commitment. And why it is important is because when you can, for example, you have line managers. We all have a line manager, a boss, who is particularly asking us to do certain things in exchange for our pay. And that is to be on time, to achieve certain KPIs, to achieve certain things in exchange for that consideration. That is not necessarily the case in leadership. In leadership, we invite people onto a journey. You don't have, as a leader, any control over whether people follow you, that they decide to follow you or not. A manager can absolutely command compliance. If you don't show up, you will probably get fired, or you have some sort of a consequence to those actions that you decide. But leadership is different. Leadership is all about asking people to come and join your journey. You're going towards a goal, and that is generally an organizational goal. Now, we need to get people to look more into the commitment space rather than the compliance space. And in construction, a lot of times it's very, very pressured environment. It's cyclical. It is about time. It's about budget. It's about quality. It is about making sure things get done. But sometimes actually most of the time, you have all of those things. The outcomes are much better achieved, much more proficiently achieved when you apply leadership principles rather than management principles. The other key consideration is that a lot of times we talk about senior leadership of an organization. That senior leadership is, again, a misnomer, because you're looking at, that may be the board, it may be the managing team of an organization. They set the vision and the goals. They don't necessarily lead anyone. So again, it is another confusion of leadership. But when we talk about leadership today between Andrea and myself, it is the leadership of ourselves and of others around us in our immediate vicinity. And while we talked about the difference, the one thing that we need to understand is that they are complementary roles. They often have overlapping elements. So there's sometimes an element of line management, and there's an element of leadership. You can only invite someone to show up on time. If they don't, at some point you have to start managing this. And so then don't make any mistake that you have to do one or the other. The key skills is understanding what it is, each of these elements and each of these processes, and the application. I want to briefly talk about skills required to be a manager, and that is generally a commanding and instructive nature. You lead by inviting followers, so it's a very different approach. Often in the construction industry, we have career progression that happens through technical achievements, commonly places people in a leadership or management role. As Pam already mentioned, you may have a project manager, you may have a site manager title, but are you a good leader? That is the question that we're going to be discussing today, because one is title focused, and that's a given authority with that title. The other one is an approach, a personal approach that comes from you and understanding the difference. And there are four things I'd like to say that are key elements of good leadership. The first one is communication. Communicating the why behind the what. When you ask someone to do something, either a task or a particular job, understanding for them why they're doing it is always half the battle to get them to do it. So think about communicating, and also understanding that the elements of communication, the message sent, the message received, and the message understood by your audience. Consider your audience. Ask more, assert less. The second element is active listening. Listening to understand, not to respond. And I think that is something we're all guilty of at times. Even I am, especially me, I think. We sometimes formulate an answer to a discussion topic or a question before the person asking the question or finishes a sentence. We're already formulating an answer. That's a terrible habit, because we don't really understand until we get to the end of that sentence or that question what it is that we're supposed to be responding to. So we're missing bits and pieces of the key communication bit. Becoming self-aware. How do others perceive you? How do you come across? Are you open? Do you have more of a managerial type of an approach? Do you invite people? Do they feel that you're approachable? Being self-aware is a key element in understanding how people respond to how you approach them. And then lastly, what is your base mode? How do you normally interact with others? When oftentimes we say, hey, do this, do that, a simple question instead of a statement would have a completely different tone. If you say, would you mind? Can I? Can you? it has a different tone, and the reception from that person is different, and their response is going to be different. So just give that a try.
Thanks, Julie. I really like what you said there about sentence starters and us being more aware of the way we're communicating. Just really briefly, can you give us a little bit of an idea about who is a leader? I'm aware that the people listening here today will be wondering, is this me? Am I a leader? When do I put my leadership hat on? Can you tell us what else would you add to who is a leader? And then we'll hear from Andrea about why it's important to also lead yourself.
Yeah. So that's a good question. Who is a leader? As I mentioned before, management is generally something that comes with a title, and the responsibility and the delegated authority comes with that role designation. Nobody says you're a project leader. We should say you're a site leader, but we don't. They're project managers, they're site managers.
Why don't we use the word leader? Is it frightening?
I think it is, because people don't understand the difference.
Okay.
So I think it is, in this operational space, the determinant factor is you're trying to achieve a goal. You're trying to get a task across the line. That is an operational space. But when we deal with people, we need to step away from the operations, because people are an unknown quantity. If you're looking at an equation, you're looking at A plus B makes C. Well, when it comes to people, A can be anything, B can be anything that makes C just about anything. There's an infinite number of variables. But to get back to the question, who is a leader? Everybody is. You are, I am, whether we have any authority over anyone, whether we are in any kind of managerial space is not important, because we lead ourselves first.
Awesome.
The
Great.
ability-
Oh,
so-
sorry.
So the ability to guide yourself and accept responsibility is a foundation for leading others. If you cannot lead yourself and you cannot show an example of that behavior you want to see in others, then you are most certainly not going to be on a leadership trajectory.
Awesome. Thanks for that. That's great. And of course, it leads us beautifully into Andrea's comment about why it is so important to lead yourself.
So I'd say that's the first place to start, thinking about how you show up every day. We expect a lot of our leaders, and I think that over the past 20 plus years working in this field, I've noticed that people expect more and more and more and more of their leaders. And if you're signing up to be in a leadership or a people management role, you need to be able to show up every day doing your best so you can be your best for your team, your organisation, etc. People expect you to know everything about mental health, diversity, how to lead legally, how to motivate people, how to just be an absolutely amazing all-round package. And sometimes when I think about it, if you list everything that's expected, it's such a tall order. I'm so grateful and amazed that people willingly put their hand up to be in that leadership space. Yes, it's fulfilling, but actually it's quite difficult. So when you think about how do you ensure that you're showing up well every day for others, there's a lot to read out there. There's so much literature in this space. You could spend months, years researching and educating yourself. So I'm going to try and boil it down to 3 things for people that I think is super important to focus on. In doing so, I'd encourage everyone on the webinar today to put yourself in the shoes of yourself as perhaps you're transitioning to a new job. You might be going to a new organisation. You might be promoted. It might be your first time leadership role, leading yourself. So first one is about coming across as credible. The second is to do with being reliable. And the third is focusing on your team, not on yourself, but on your team. So in terms of your personal credibility, if we think about, this is what you bring to the table. So maybe you're a technical expert and that's why you've been promoted. But when you become a people manager, people have an expectation that not only have you got the expertise in perhaps the area that you're leading, or maybe you're a generalist and you're bringing more general skills to the table, but everyone around you is going to expect, and they'll be watching you for this, do you know how to lead people? this comes down to some basics. So things like, how do you motivate and coach someone? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But also some real fundamentals. So things like, if you're interviewing someone, do you know what you can legally ask? If you have to performance manage someone, do you know how to do that? If you have got a misconduct situation, do you know how to deal with that properly? And if you don't know how to deal with that and you stuff it up, that will absolutely undermine your credibility very quickly as a leader. People will be watching you and they will see you make those mistakes. So what do you do about that? How do you educate yourself to be a really good people leader? If you're working for a large organisation, there's probably an HR function you can go to for support. There's probably some in-house training that you can do. But if you're in a business where you can't readily access something like that, one resource I would absolutely suggest that you go and take a look at is the MB Employment New Zealand website. It's excellent. It covers off everything under the sun around what you need to do to legally manage people. Lots of good guidance, lots of best practice. The reason I also suggest people go there is that I've noticed that a lot of employees, when they're looking at issues, will have gone and looked at that themselves to educate themselves, and it's great to see people doing that. As a people manager, you need to at least have that minimum level of knowledge when you're talking to people. So as I said, we'll talk a little bit more about the coaching and motivating, but I think as a people manager, don't overlook the basics in terms of your credibility around what is it that you need to do around how you manage. So that's number one. So everyone's looking at you thinking, is this person credible? Can I trust them or not? The second's about your reliability. So why is reliability so important? Well, it's fundamental. It builds trust. So how do you lead yourself to be reliable? You're not going to be reliable if you're stressed out, if you're not sleeping, if you're not eating properly, if you're not exercising properly. You've got to think about investing that time in yourself so you can be at peak performance. It's no different than being an athlete. If you really want to excel at people leadership, you want to make sure you're showing up really well every day so that you can be reliable and you do what you say you will. So that's about figuring out, okay, people will see me make commitments. How am I going to ensure that I've got a system I can follow that says, I've made this commitment, I'm going to follow through on it. As an individual contributor, you'll be pulled up if you're not contributing. But if you are managing a team and people can't trust you to do what you say you will, then that's fundamentally going to impact on the trust that you need to have. And then the last is about the focus that you have. So as a leader, it's really important that you've got that confidence to not focus on yourself and try and prove to everybody that, I'm best, I'm the greatest. Your focus has got to be on your team, on the organisation, and on your customers. Those three things are where you need to focus. So if you're imagining you're transitioning into a new role, the questions that you ask will demonstrate where your focus is. So if you're curious and you're asking all about a customer, your team, their priorities, really seeking to understand, that's going to really demonstrate that that's what your focus is all about. And if you're leading yourself and you're building your confidence and you know your stuff, you'll be in a much stronger position to be able to be curious and ask those sorts of questions. Another way of demonstrating to people that you care about what they care about, your focus is on others, not on yourself, is starting with why, and that's something that Yuli touched on just before. An excellent resource or author I would suggest in that area is Simon Sinek. Many of you have probably heard of him. If you have, worthwhile going back and looking at his work, some excellent TED Talks. He's all about start with why, and it's not why I care, it's why it's probably important to whoever I'm dealing with, whether it's my customer, my organisation, or my own team. So in summary, those three things, if you can focus on leading yourself to show up with credibility, to be reliable and to focus on other people, then you're halfway there in terms of being a really impactful leader and the sort of person that other people want to follow.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. I should mention at this point too, hopefully you can see on the screen that we've got a Slido code. For those that are interested to send a question in, that's the easiest way to do it. If we don't have time to answer them in this session, we will answer them in the show notes that go alongside the recording and the resources page of our website. So that's Slido code 8828640. All right. Andrea, back to you again. Can you tell us about some of the interesting challenges that people managers in particular are experiencing right now and how they might be able to deal with those challenges?
Sure. If I think about all of the industries that I've worked in across my career, there are two things that really stand out for me in building and construction that I think it is different, it is unique. Number one is recruiting and developing people in a sector where the future work pipeline is unclear. Right now, it's particularly unclear, but it has been that way for a long time. I just remind everyone of what it was like, post COVID, as the borders started to open up. We had a shortage of building supplies, we had a shortage of talent. It was a difficult time for everyone. Planning in that kind of a environment is very, very difficult. And I think that one of the things that's unique to building and construction when you think about recruiting, developing a team, is if you haven't got that same certainty around your future work pipeline, as other industries will, it makes it just that more challenging. So take, for example, recruiting from overseas. If I'm bringing in a nurse, a teacher, they can expect to have a long career, or certainly for the length of their visa, whilst they're in New Zealand. But if you're talking about builders, carpenters, project managers in the construction space, there isn't that same level of certainty. And so, okay, we've had volatility with work pipelines, regardless. And then you fast forward to today, where it feels like we've got an oversupply of people in this space because we don't have the certainty of the projects necessarily. We're looking to see things change next year. We're hearing a lot of positive signs, and I think it's really important to stay focused on the positive and not talk ourselves down. That's super important. However, when you think about what is it that we can control, the things we can control is being really agile with our workforce planning. So what I mean by that is continually thinking about if a role is needed in the sense of, am I growing this team, or if someone's leaving, am I necessarily going to replace this role or not? Being more agile in terms of how we review that. We used to look at longer term planning horizons. We've now got to be super, super short. Things are changing month to month, sometimes week to week. So it's that shorter planning time horizon. And then the second, I think, is about how do you motivate your team by focusing on the things that you can control. So what can you control? You can control how you show up. So that's a bit to do with the stuff I was talking about before. How are you showing up as a leader? What are you focusing on? So focusing on the positive things. There are some days where I think if we all just watched the news and we looked at the media headlines, there'd be some days where you'd think, what am I doing this for? But actually, keeping your eye on the bigger picture, all of the wins that you're having. Are you sharing those wins with your team? Are they getting that balanced message? Because it's very easy to hear just the negative sometimes. So being really focused on what is the total picture that's going on, and sharing the wins. Sometimes we can be so focused on thinking about the next thing that we don't necessarily celebrate the success. And teams need to hear what's going on and hear about those positive things. And then also super clear communication. If we don't communicate, people make up things, I think. If there's a vacuum of communication, minds go to worst case scenarios. So doing our best to keep really transparent and open in terms of communication. So that's sort of focused a bit on what's happening right now, but I was reflecting on what's the other challenge and what's something else that's unique as a people leader when you're working in the building and construction sector. And I think that something that's quite unique for this sector for leaders is the role that we need them to play in the health and safety space. Health and safety is super important across many, many industries, but particularly in building and construction. So what's different is, of course, there's the long list of things that we need to focus on to keep people safe. But add on top of that the complexity that comes when you've got projects where you've got the lead contractor, the subbies, overlapping health and safety obligations, all of these things that come together. So that when you think about as a leader, what needs to be in your toolkit, I think you need to have bigger and better tools in the health and safety space than many other leaders need to. And what that means is showing up every day and being the role model from a health and safety perspective, because of course we all emulate what we see. If we see our leaders in this area and they're absolutely demonstrating what it means to be a strong leader in the health and safety space, I think that makes a difference. And it also means that you need to be an expert in this area, not just because of legal compliance, for yourself, for your organisation, but because your team or your organisation is watching you and what you do. And so you have to have that broader understanding, not just for your business, but the sector end to end in terms of where you're operating. So those are sort of the two things I would call out as being particularly unique for building and construction.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Andrea. And absolutely echo tautoko what you just said about health and safety in leadership, whether it's management leadership or governance, board level, health, safety and well-being, the more encompassing kind of triple term there is incredibly important, because the most important thing is that our people go home safely to their families at the end of the day. Back to you, Lee. Really interested for the people who are listening and engaged in this conversation, they'll be trying to think, which bit of this is me? How do I figure out if I'm a leader, small L, leader, big L? Where am I? So how do people figure out what type of leader they want to be? What are your tips?
There's a couple of things that we really need to consider when we're talking about leadership. Leadership of others is not just about the leader. It's not just about the immediate person who you're managing or leading. It's not about just a team. Think about your own experience in the past. So think about your own career all the way back to the beginning and to where you are now. You most likely have had experiences, good and bad, in leadership, that you were probably on the receiving end, or you were, like Andrea said, you were on the observing end. So you saw when something isn't right. So take that into consideration, and then take into consideration that your current leader may not necessarily act with the best toolkit as well. So do they have the right tools in their toolbox to do the best job? Or in the past as well. So understanding that leadership that's not a transferable skill. Just because you're a good project manager or you're a good site manager doesn't make you a good leader of others. There's a whole new way of thinking involved, that mindset shift. But the things that you need to look at is a good leader will look at four things, really. He or she will say, I was wrong. Another thing they say is, I made a mistake, or I'm making mistakes. They say, I don't know, but I'll find out. Leadership accountability requires a personal commitment to honesty and integrity. And I think that is something that Andrea mentioned, that we're always watching, and people are watching us and we're watching others. When that integrity and that honesty is not there and it's not evident, you notice it. Then you notice that, is this a leader or is this a manager? You can manage without those elements, but you cannot lead without them. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Ask yourself that. You may be at the beginning of your career journey in this space where you're just leading yourself. You may be an apprentice, you may be new into the workforce, and you're thinking, okay, well, I can get myself to work on time. But think about 20, 30 years down the road, when you are in that space through career progression, where you are leading a team, or you're leading others, or you're managing a whole group of people. What do you want them to remember you for? Do you want them to say, that was a terrible experience? Or do you want them to say, this had such a positive influence on my life, on my career? Be the leader you would have wanted, not the one you necessarily had. So remember not to repeat mistakes that others have already made, that you felt were mistakes. Inspire learning, honesty, and integrity in yourself and all around you. That is a fundamental skill and motto of anyone in a leadership position. What got you here is not what's going to get you there. So your next step in that leadership journey does require a little bit of a mindset shift. And that is the key difference between managing and leading. So what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? And lastly, I want to talk about thinking about the wider extent of your impact. Whether you are leading a team or whether you're leading yourself and you just have colleagues around you, or whether you're leading a whole company, think about the impact of those beyond your immediate vicinity. People go home and they have a mood based on their experience at work. They're impacted by the culture, by the climate at work, and they will take that home. We're not an island. It's just human nature. They will go home and they will talk positively or negatively about your work, about the culture, about the organization. They're going to say, I had a great day at work today. This is what happened to me. Or they're going to say, oh, it's a terrible thing, another terrible day at work, and this is what happened to me. So think about where do you have influence beyond the immediate vicinity? What do you want people to say about you as a leader in their own careers? Be authentic. Don't try to impersonate someone else. People see through a facade, and this does not inspire trust. Ultimately, leadership is built on trust. And this goes back to what Andrea mentioned, is are you trustworthy? Are you reliable? Be humble. Remember that you once started somewhere and your success didn't come overnight. Take time on the journey. Remember that. Do what you say you're going to do. Hold yourself accountable and expect the same in your team. This is leading by example. And lastly, protect the dignity of the people around you. What I mean by dignity, it's not respect. Dignity is the self-worth. There are times when you have to manage people and you have to have difficult conversations, but at all times, remember that those people do have the right to have dignity. You don't have the right to ever violate someone else's dignity, and preserving other people's dignity will lift your own. It'll strengthen your own dignity. Fairness, safety, inclusion, a trusting environment, a sense of autonomy and an independence, and belonging and connection. That is what good leadership uses as a foundation that leads to great organizational culture. And that leads to a positive work environment and to positive business outcome.
Positive stories. I love that what you said can be distilled into the stories that go home with our teammates each night. So really interested, Andrea, if you can help us with what that leadership journey looks like. How do our people move from being team members to being leaders, and to help create those stories that our people take home each night?
It's a really interesting question, and I was thinking about this from two perspectives. One is, how do I get to a point where I'm recognized in my career that I might be promoted into being a leader? So how do I do that? And then once I'm there, how do I evolve my skill set so that I become the sort of leader that people want to follow? So first of all, thinking about, how do I get to a point where I am seen as somebody who could lead others? I think it goes back to something Yuli said earlier, which is all of us have that ability to demonstrate leadership, whether we're talking about within our work context, whether talking about in the community and the sports teams that we might mentor or coach, the community roles that we play, volunteering, whatever it is. There are things that we're doing that enable us, and particularly at work, to demonstrate thought leadership on a particular area or being proactive around a particular area. But I think the key thing is demonstrating the ability to coach other people. And so I think coaching actually is the key answer here as to how you both demonstrate that you are somebody who is ready to move into people leadership, and once you are there, that you become the type of leader that people want to follow. So there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, still about coaching. Coaching as a concept in business has been around for a long time, but I still encounter people who can get a little bit confused between the difference of coaching, mentoring, and training, and they are quite different things. So if I just briefly outline what the difference is. So If I'm mentoring somebody, I'm telling them about my experience. I'm helping them with a pathway of how to get from A to B based on what I've done. So that's mentoring. That's not what coaching is. Training is I am training somebody on how to do something. These are the things that we expect. This is the way we operate. This is the health and safety standards you need to to follow. This is more, I'm in the training space when I do that. And as a manager, you do both. You mentor people and you train them. But coaching is the most powerful, because coaching it's actually just asking questions. It's as simple as that. So I've got to ask questions of people rather than just tell them what the answer is. And I think when you're a first-time leader, it is so tempting to go straight from, I've got all the answers, I will tell people what they need to do, and I'll give them all of the information. But the thing is, that's not helping a team to grow and come up with their own answers. And I think we're amazing as human beings. If we come up with something ourselves, we are much more likely to follow through than if someone tells us that this is what the answer is. We're more likely to pick something up and run with it if we're invested in the outcome. And so through coaching, which is literally just asking questions, it helps people elicit their own answer. And I think that's the fundamental difference. So I've probably oversimplified what coaching is. So at the risk of doing that, I'm going to balance that now by giving you all a quick acronym. This is an acronym that's been around a long time. It's an oldie, but it is a goodie. It's called GROW. Okay, so if I'm coaching somebody, G in the GROW is what's the goal? And it's making sure that you're really clear what's the goal, what's the outcome that we're trying to achieve here. And so asking questions to elicit that information, what's the goal? And then the R stands for what's the reality. So figuring out, what's actually happening right now. And you can figure out what's the gap between where you're trying to get to and where you are right now. The O stands for options. So this is asking questions about, what are the options? What have you already considered? Who might you talk to find out some options? You're just drilling down with questions to find out what are some possibilities. It's like a brainstorm, but you're not putting the idea out there. You're asking the question. And then the W in GROW is for way forward. So what are you actually going to do? What is the way forward here? And as a leader, if you use that kind of an approach in how you're coaching people, they'll come up with their own answers. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing that you can do, either leading a team directly, or if you want to lead a team. You can do this with others too in the way you have your conversations.
That's great. Thanks, Andrea. We've got time just for one more of our predetermined questions and then a quick update about things happening at the Institute. Can you tell us about why feedback is important and how to give effective feedback? And I'm going to also ask about the two directions of the feedback, because I'm assuming the leaders, in terms of setting them up for success and the breadth of their position descriptions, they also need feedback. So can you give us some insights there?
Yep, absolutely. As a leader, I think you have to create an environment where others will give you feedback. So you need to ask for it. That's super important. The leader doesn't know everything. The leaders need to ask that. And I think my own personal preference is genuine face-to-face feedback through conversation with people you trust. There's a time and a place for 360 surveys and feedback that way. There's a time and a place for psychometric testing and getting feedback and results that way. But actually, I think just human conversations and from your own direct reports and those around you, asking them for feedback. You've got to create a safe environment for them to do that, because of course there's a power imbalance. You're not going to want to say something that you think might come back at you as a direct report to your manager, or in a team, wherever you're at. You've got to create that sort of psychological safety for people to do that. But in terms of thinking about feedback for your team, as a leader, if you're not giving your team feedback, they're not going to know if they're on the right track or not. Some people are going to assume that they are. They might not be. But if you have got a diverse team, and most teams are pretty diverse these days, particularly when you think about age. So our Gen Xers and our millennials, they want feedback and they expect it. And if you're not providing that feedback, you're really leaving them in the dark. Just a reminder, I know I often forget this. We're talking about millennials and Gen X and Gen Z. What is it? So your millennials, this is your 1981 to 2000, and your Gen Z is your 2001 onwards. I'm personally a Gen X, and I think I grew up in an environment of, well, if I'm not being told it's not okay, it must be okay. But just because I think that way doesn't mean everybody does. And I certainly see it a lot with our younger generations coming through. They're hungry for feedback. They've grown up in a different way. They've had a different schooling experience. And when they come into the workplace, they want to know how they're going. And so how that feedback is given, it's just not okay to say things like, well done, mate. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, it's probably better than nothing, but it's not enough. We need to give feedback that's really specific. And so here you go. Here comes another acronym. Last one, I promise. This one is STAR. So be specific. So the S is for what's the situation or the task that we're talking about, that we're giving feedback about. What's the action that the person took? So what did they do, or perhaps something that they didn't do, but be really clear about what's the action you're talking about. And then the R stands for what's the result. And if you can talk to those things, it suddenly becomes really meaningful and you get it and you know exactly what you're getting feedback on. Look, you may agree with it or you might not agree with it, but at least you understand. And it takes us further forward in terms of performance and our own leadership, rather than just a simple, oh, well done, that was great. Or the Kiwi, that was good. I'm fine. That's not enough.
That's great. I have learned something today. I didn't realise the STAR acronym, which of course is so useful when you're the interviewee and you're trying to recount the situations that you have influenced. That's really fantastic. Thank you. Hey, we did have one question into Slido, which was about the leader's ability to balance both, I guess, operational status quo with innovation and delivering into the vision. So I wondered, did either of you want to comment into that? About how...
I think I would just jump in very quickly, Yuli, and you feel free to expand. I'd just say if there's a magic answer to that one, I'd love to know it too, because we need both. We've got to be operationally onto it and have continuous improvement and results, and then also driving innovation, whether it's disruptive or it's big innovation or small. The magic answer, I don't know. We just know we need both.
Oh, Yuli, would you add anything?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Andrea. But the thing that we need to remember is that at the end, we're dealing with people, and people are afraid of change. Change, good, bad, whatever. They do not like change because it is unknown. It is uncomfortable. So whatever the change, whether it is imposed on us or whether it is an organizational change that comes about, or whether it's a change within ourselves, remember that to just explain, again, it comes back to communication. Explain the transparency, what is going on? Why do we need a change? Why do we need a disruptor? Why do we need to innovate? Why do we not just keep doing what we've been doing? Well, there is a why, there's a what. So we need to do something, especially in a very volatile environment as we are experiencing right now. But there is a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And I think we owe people the courtesy and the respect of explaining to them why an organization does anything. It is not good enough to just say, we're restructuring, or we're selling off a part of the business, or we are upsizing, downsizing, whatever. Explain why you're doing it and why it is necessary, and have you explored all the options? How does it impact the people? And it's really important for the seniors and the leadership team, and this is the people that are making these strategic decisions, to sit down and think about not just the bottom line and operational efficiencies, but think about the people and how they're impacted. Think about what they're taking away from that experience that you're proposing. So whether you're having people that are being let go, there are different things, contractors are coming to an end of a pipeline. These are all things that they don't necessarily choose. Business doesn't choose to lay off people for giggles, but there's a reason for it. But remember that in the end, you owe that person the courtesy and to preserve their dignity. It is about how you do it. It's the tone that makes the music. And it is all about communication.
Thanks, Yuli. Thanks, Andrea. And thanks for those comments on the question we received there. I'm going to need to wrap it up now. We have gone over time. This is a really big topic. And just so that folks who are listening know, we will be running one of our Building Legends series in Auckland on the 11th of September and Wellington on the 12th of September, focused on people management. And would be great to see many of you at that. You can find the detail on the website under events. The recording to this and the show notes, and we've heard some great connections, I guess, to Simon Sinek, to the MB Employment website. We'll make sure all those URL links are in those show notes. We will be doing our next industry insights on the BIM SAFE program, the Building Information Modelling, so that's a health and safety digitally enabled program. And of course, we're hoping to see folks at our New Zealand Building People Awards on the 30th of August in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, because of course the Institute of Building is about supporting and developing and enabling the people behind the projects. So thanks very much for joining us today. Thank you very much to our guests, and we'll see you next time. Ka kite anō.
Thank you.